Jernaro Gilford is leaving the BYU football program, and he'll be headed to Michigan to join the staff of Kyle Whittingham, working under Jay Hill. Now, on its head, that's a major loss for the BYU football program. Coach G, as players like to call him, has been at BYU as long as Kalani Sitake has been at BYU. When they fired Elisa Tuiaki and cleaned house on the defensive side of the football, there was one defensive assistant that survived all that, and that was Jernaro Gilford, because simply put, Jernaro is indispensable. It's not that long ago, and those of you of a certain age, including my generation, remember it's not that long ago, BYU was like the boneyard of cornerbacks, and that's putting it mildly. It feels like it was just a place that BYU, even during the Lavelle era, struggled to recruit high-level cornerbacks. For every Omar Morgan and Tim McTire, it felt like there was some Johnny or Joe out there that really didn't have business playing that spot, but BYU had to put somebody at cornerback, and they hoped to make do with it. Jernaro Gilford, during his decade run at BYU, made cornerbacks actually a strength of BYU's defense. BYU was able to play man press coverage. They were able to do everything they wanted to do defensively, and a lot of it points to A, the recruiting that Jernaro Gilford did, and B, coaching up the players he had in this program. Think of a guy like Evan Johnson, for example. Evan Johnson has been an absolute star for BYU this year, and he was an offensive player all growing up. He was discovered on the Monterey Peninsula, that's where he went to high school, by former BYU coach. I'm trying to remember who it was, but then came to BYU, said, you're going to play cornerback, and all Coach G did was make him into, I think, a fringe all Big 12 candidate at cornerback. Evan has another year, and I hope he's going to spend it at Provo, because I really do think that he is going to be a star in this system. But without Coach Gilford on the sidelines, man, that's a major blow to BYU. Now, it's been out there for a while. It's been rumored. I've been hearing about it for quite some time. I heard it went back and forth. I heard BYU and Michigan. It was essentially a bidding war to try and get Gilford either to Ann Arbor or keep him home in Provo, Utah. And the poll, and probably the money, let's be very blunt, the money probably pulled him to Ann Arbor, Michigan. And I hope it has an impact that in the end, maybe Coach Gilford comes back around as a defensive coordinator at some point, maybe for the BYU football program. Jernaro is on that career track where he is going to end up as a defensive coordinator in high-level college football. And I hope that maybe the next time BYU needs to hire a new DC, it could be him. We're calling him home from Michigan, as it were, saying, hey, now it's your time to shine in the defensive coordinator role for BYU. Now, the inevitable question is, hey, why wasn't he elevated to defensive coordinator? Only Kalani Sitake can answer that question, because he ultimately makes those hires. And there's very strong indications that, and I've heard it myself, that Kelly Papinga could end up as BYU's defensive coordinator. Only Kalani Sitake will be able to address the why, the how, all of that. And I'm sure in time that he will speak to that. But losing Jernaro Gilford, to kind of get back to the point here, it's a major blow for BYU. Jernaro has been really phenomenal addition to BYU. He's been a mentor for a lot of athletes, even beyond football. And I've had conversations with individuals who say that his impact off the field maybe even bigger than it was on the field. And we all know how big the on-field contribution was for BYU football. But I trust that Kalani Sitake, as he has done in the past, will fill that spot, and he'll do so with a good coach or two. Who knows what happens? We'll talk about some candidates I've got in my mind momentarily, but big flop of Michigan always cheating. I don't think this is cheating. This is the reality of the college universe that we exist in these days. Guys want to go where they feel that they have the best opportunity to succeed. Now, I would argue that your opportunity to succeed is higher in Provo, considering the framework and the groundwork that has been gone into this BYU defense for Jernaro Gilford, but he has been sold on the vision that Jay Hill and Kyle Whittingham have at Michigan. And I'll be very blunt. Coaching at Michigan, even though you may think of Michigan, it's one of the top 5 brands in college football. And having that on your resume as a college coach, it's like it's like a gold star. And I know that sounds kind of cheesy to say, but it really does open doors that may otherwise not be open to you as a coach. If you can say, hey, I've coached at Michigan, and more importantly, if they have success at said program. Now, we're watching the first few steps of what the Kyle Whittingham era at Michigan are going to look like, and it'll bear watching to see what a guy like Jay Hill and Jernaro Gilford do in in Ann Arbor versus what BYU does in Provo. But here's the thing. Kalani Sitake You have any sense that he's fretting this? No, I think he has had time to internalize the defections. That's what they are, and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. So I do think that I understand why Jernaro Gilford would be pulled to Michigan. And like I said, I hope it has the effect that he continues to kind of grow on his coaching journey and could end up as a defensive coordinator for BYU, because I really do think he's that bright of a coach. And in time, he will get that opportunity. But I also trust that Kalani Sitake, as he's often done in his past 10 years, will make good coaching decisions, good coaching hires, and BYU will just keep doing their thing. It's been encouraging to see guys like Therian Alexander III, who very well could be a guy that you'd think, hey, maybe he's a transfer portal target. Seems like on social media, all Trey has done is pump up and say, hey, thanks, Coach G, but all he's talked about is how much he enjoys being in Provo. That speaks to the culture that BYU has. It's bigger than any individual coach or player. It speaks to the bigger collective mindset of the BYU football program. This is a program that made the Big 12 title game. They were knocking on the door for the second straight year of the college football playoff, and it shows that guys want to be in Provo in spite of the fact that they've committed to guys. And a good point by Big Flop here. I'll throw this up. I thought for sure Satuala was gone when Jay Hill left. I can't wait to see him play next season. If you didn't miss it yesterday, Faletau Satuala announced he's going to play at BYU next year, and he was very, very blunt about why he picked BYU. It was because of Jay Hill. And that led a lot of people, and I initially was concerned about it as well, that Faletau was going to follow Jay Hill to Michigan. And I would imagine that there were some overtures probably made, but Faletau decided, you know what? I'm better served playing in Provo, Utah. I'm better served playing in this defense. He has a kind of an inside track at being the starting free safety next year. Tanner Walt exits as a first-team All-Big 12 safety, and insert Faletau Satuala, who could just kind of go right into that slot and continue a strong run of strong safety play for BYU. So I do think that it's going to be encouraging, I think, that programs like Michigan, like Penn State, think of all the programs who have tried to pick off BYU coaches this season. Yeah, we're too good for you guys to play in our league, but we're not too good enough to steal your coaches, or in the case of Penn State, not steal your coach. Kalani Sitake will get this handled. I got full faith that Kalani knows what this program needs. He's got a huge, huge network. I talked to enough coaches, and I don't claim to talk to all of them, but I talked to enough college coaches who are effusive in their praise for who Kalani Sitake is as a human being. And that extends itself to him having a very large network of coaches that he can tap into and say, hey, you interested in coming and working for me at BYU? So have faith that, yes, it is a loss to lose Jay Hill. It's a big loss, I think, to lose Jernaro Gilford, because, as I said, the cornerback position has been as good as it's ever been, it feels like, in BYU football history with him coaching those guys. But I got to believe that Kalani Sitake, he'll do a good job finding people, or finding an individual in particular at corner, to go and find the right option to replace Jernaro Gilford, and obviously in time also replace Jay Hill, even if it is Kelly Papinga. The other big news is Gary Andersen. I thought Gary Andersen was tied at the hip with Jay Hill, because obviously they've been working together at Weber for a time before coming to BYU. I thought that Gary was going to jump and go to Michigan. Well, no, he announced yesterday on the KSL Sports Zone, my radio station that I work for, told Hans and Scotty, no, I'm sticking around in Provo. Now, he also mentioned that he's going to remain in his analyst role, and that's what I've kind of been referring to our insiders group as well as on this podcast. Gary would be a fantastic defensive coordinator. Don't get that wrong, but he loves the fact that being an analyst, he gets to do what he wants to do, and what that is coach. He gets to coach. He doesn't want to deal with the recruiting, doesn't want to deal with all the off-the-field stuff that you have to deal in terms of the bureaucracy of being a full-time assistant. As an analyst, you're on the field coaching guys, and he also says coaching coaches. He wants to be a mentor for kind of the next generation of both players and coaches. And I think in his role, he can sit in that box next to whether it's Kelly Papinga or anybody else, and essentially talk through strategy with them. And they make the ultimate call as they hold the coordinator title. But having that as a mentor, a guy in your ear saying, hey, consider this, look at this, that's huge for whoever ends up as DC for BYU, to have a guy like Gary Andersen sticking around. So a lot of thoughts on Coach Gilford's impact leaving BYU. And by the way, I will also say this. I hope that Jernaro Gilford kills it in Ann Arbor, Michigan, because so long as he kills it, guess what? He's going to be a high-level coach. And in time, as I said, I want to see him back in Provo, and probably as a defensive coordinator. So I hope he absolutely goes out there and kills it in Ann Arbor, Michigan, as a member of Kyle Whittingham's staff. All right. So the inevitable question I haven't answered yet, and we're going to get to this coming up, is who are some of the options BYU should look at least in my mind, in terms of potential additions to replace Jernaro Gilford at the cornerback spot? Well, I think there's a handful of them out there, but I also trust that Kalani Sitake, he's got a lot more than I have, and we'll talk about those next, coming up on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. There's nothing like the college football season and college basketball season as well. Tailgates, packed stadiums, being right there in the middle of it all, the energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting your tickets, well, that used to be the frustrating part. Long queues, logins, and prices jumping at checkout. That's where Game Time comes into the fray, my friends. Gives the advantage to you as the fan. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and beyond with just a few taps. And the best part about Game Time is you can go on the app right now. It's incredibly easy to use. I've used it multiple times myself to get tickets to events. You can go from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes and with just a few taps. The best part is you can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you're getting in terms of your view at the venue. Seeing college football tickets start as low as $25 to make it easy to plan your game day trips. And the best part is my favorite feature, knowing prices include all fees right up front, makes the whole process stress-free. So take a guesswork out of buying your tickets and do it with our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And if you want more of this exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, access to a members-only Discord server, ad-free episodes of this podcast for your pod player, whatever it is, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the like, join the Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. It's at lockedoncougars.supercast.com if you want to check it out, or go to this website here as well, lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer to learn more about it. Many of you have already joined who are in our former insiders group, but if you want to be a part of the Everydayer Club, do it now and click the link in the show notes below, or check out lockedoncougars.supercast.com. All right. Before we go on today's show, let's talk about some of the options that I have been kind of thinking about could replace Jernaro Gilford. And I also say that this is a bit crowdsourced. So guys like Jeff Hansen put it out on social media as well, and they were names that he mentioned as well as ones that I've come up with as well in terms of guys BYU could tab to replace Jernaro Gilford. The first one that came to mind for me was Robertson Daniel. Now, if you remember Robertson Daniel, he was one of the cornerbacks that Jernaro Gilford, I think, mentored and did a really, really fine job coaching him up at BYU. Robertson went on to play for quite a while in the Canadian Football League. If I recall, it was 2 seasons that he spent as a graduate assistant for BYU. And after his final season as a GA, he made some comments, I think it was to Jay Drew of the Deseret News, that he would like to be a full-time assistant coach. He's been training athletes privately in football in the Utah area for quite some time as well. But if Robertson's interested, I would absolutely put him in the mix here, because he's got the experience having coached at BYU. He's played professionally up in Canada, and he's obviously worked as a coach already at BYU. So Kalani Sitake and company would know what he brings to the table. Another name that came up includes Demario Warren. Now, Demario had a great run at Southern Utah University as a defensive coordinator. His head coaching tenure, on the other hand, went really sideways down in Cedar City. But since he moved on after being let go by Southern Utah, he's been an incredible coach up at Boise State. And Demario is a guy that knows Utah because he coached at Southern Utah for so long under Ed Lamb, and obviously as a head coach in Cedar City. I think if he wants to come back to Utah, he'd do very, very well in that position. Another name that Jeff Hansen threw out, Devontae Cross, who played at Virginia under Bronco Mendenhall and Kelly Papinga. He's currently coaching at Utah Tech. Could be a young coach that you look at potentially coming up from the FCS level. And then also a former Ute, because, you know, we like to be really back and forth, it feels like, between BYU and Utah in terms of hiring each other's coaches. Andre Dyson. Now, that name should sound familiar because Andre was a standout. Clearfield High, if I recall correctly, was a stud there. Played at Utah for quite a while. Well, he just recently was let go as Weber State's cornerbacks coach. So he's got experience coaching the position. He's obviously knows the state well from his high school days, both playing and coaching, and would be, I think, a name that you throw into the mix as well. So those are just 4 names that I came up with, along with Jeff Hansen mentioning them as well on social media. But beyond that, as I mentioned, Kalani Sitake, he's done a really, really good job building a coaching network, as it were, that spreads far and wide. He has got a really, really good rep as a coach. And I do think that the bigger point is, think of how little impact this Kyle Whittingham move really had on BYU in terms of players. Because I often say on this podcast, coaches coach, players play. And yeah, I think you can replace a defensive coordinator and a cornerbacks coach. But the biggest thing that I was concerned about was, okay, let's say you pull Jay Hill away. Let's say you pull Jernaro Gilford. And there were some rumors out there about Aaron Roderick. And as I understand it, A-Rod's locked in with BYU now, which is a positive. Having the coaches there are great. But if those coaches leave, all of a sudden it becomes like a jailbreak where players start running for the hills. That's the concern you got to have, because you got to have athletes. And to BYU's credit, they've retained essentially every star level player that I can think of so far. And now there are some guys still weighing their opportunities at the pro level, guys like LJ Martin and Isaiah Glasker. And hey, if they want to come back to BYU, you take them. But if they want to go pro, you wish them nothing but the best. But I'm very, very heartened to hear that a lot of these guys are sticking around in Provo, Utah. That's the good news, is the talent that these coaches, Jay Hill, Jernaro Gilford, Kalani Sitake, on down the line, have gone literally for years building up, are sticking around in Provo, Utah. It screams that there's a good culture in Provo. They're a winning program. Obviously, they've gone 23-4 the past 2 years, two of the best seasons, I think, frankly, in BYU football history, even though they were shut out once again from the college football playoff. But what BYU has accomplished is a very, very, what they accomplished and established, I should say, is a very, very competent, high-level winning program that people aren't looking to leave. Yes, coaches are going to come in and try and steal away BYU coaches because guess what? They want to have a little bit of what BYU's got, and I understand that. But I do think that we've got a good thing going here for Cougar. And Keith, you're asking us, what's the status of Evan Johnson? Last I saw, I think it was Trey Alexander said he's on vacation. Who knows? But I would imagine that Evan, if like these other players, wants to be part of a winning program, he can do just that. Because the flip side of it, let's say they were to jump to Michigan. Understand that Michigan, they won at a pretty high level last year, but with a whole new regime change, it takes time to get up to speed. Are you going to win at the same level at Michigan year 1 under Kyle Whittingham as you are in year 11 under Kalani Sitake, coming off a Big 12 title appearance type season? I'd be hard pressed to say that you're going to do that. Michigan could, but they also, speaking of Michigan, have to get things situated and figured out. So I do think that this is a strong program. Speaking of BYU, considered a badge of honor that the Big Ten and other programs in those conferences are trying to steal away what BYU's got. That's a good sign if you're a Cougar fan. You want those programs trying to pick it off because that shows the success that BYU has had. So we'll see how it all goes. But yeah, big impact with Jernaro Gilford leaving, but there are options out there. And like I said, I just mentioned 4 names there, but I'm sure there'll be more that will be popping up in the coming literally hours and days as BYU gets things situated. So there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this Saturday afternoon. Truthfully, thank you for being here. More than 270 of you, it looks like, live right now that I can see on my end. Checking this out. If you haven't done so already, please click that like button on YouTube before you go. But if you're watching this after the fact, subscribe, rate, review, share with your family and friends, and consider becoming a member of the Locked On Cougars Everydayer Club. Having a lot of fun with the Everydayers. Inside access, insight, all that type of stuff that you get coming to your phone in the form of a text message as a part of the insiders group via text. So it's a really, really fun thing. And Tommy, I will be sure to address that in a future episode. Any transfer running backs BYU was interested in. Still working on that. The transfer portal, even though it's off to a flying start, there's still a lot to sort out. So I'll be doing my research on that, and I'll have more for you guys on future editions of the show. But trust me, BYU's looking at running backs. They'd have to. They're just inevitable. They have to find some running backs out there in the portal. But as always, truthfully, thank you for all of your support. Thank you for making this your first listen today. Go make your second listen. Locked On College Football, Locked On Big 12. Just find another Locked On show and give them some love. And as always, thank you for being an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.